800-375-4188. That's 800-375-4188.
Great, thank you very much. And as I said, for everybody, I heartily recommend the publication and take him up on his offer for the free samples. You'll see exactly what I mean. Bob, I want to start tonight by talking a little bit about my show, what I'm up to, and why having you on is such a marvelous opportunity for our listeners to learn and have the veil pulled back. The tagline to my show is Piercing the Veil, and my intention is to try and help people out here in our listener land understand and be able to see through all of the disinformation, the outright distortion and so on that the government and economical and mainstream media are putting out to try and convince us of things that are not true and maintain an illusion that all is well in this country and that we're well on the road to recovery. And how I'd like to start that is I'd like to ask you, what do you think is the biggest distortion or biggest misrepresentation that you're seeing in the media today regarding the economy in this country?
I think it's the criminality. And that's because the media, the general media, is controlled by Wall Street and banking. And when Wall Street and banking create crimes, there's nobody to report on them because the story is killed. And we recently have had a government, in the government which is still in place, that has simply thrown the Constitution out the window, and at the same time have engaged in corruption on a scale unprecedented in the history of the United States. And that knows no party and no particular individual. It's a collective bunch of people who are engaged in an ongoing criminal enterprise. Secondly, the ravaging of the American public by Wall Street, and particularly the connected firms that own the Federal Reserve, such as Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, and a number of others. And I spent 28 years in Wall Street, and these people have been getting away with financial murder for years and years and years. And it's about time it stopped. That's probably one of the most important stories of our time. Also, the fact that the privately owned Federal Reserve is deliberately, among other central banks, trying, although the public doesn't understand this and they have a difficult time understanding it, trying to bring down the U.S. and the world economy so that the people will be forced to accept world government. I think that's the second biggest story, and they're the key. The Federal Reserve is the key, and that's why Ron Paul presented H.R. 1207, the act to investigate the transparency of the Federal Reserve. And that bill is bottled up in committee with 277 co-sponsors presently, which shows you how much our democracy is working in America. A very important story because the main cog in all this is the Federal Reserve. That is surrounded by members of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberger Group, the Royal Society, the Group of 30, the Group of 300, and the groups go on, including most of the large foundations, which are controlled by these people. And they supply the human manpower and the money to be able to do what they want to do. And another facet is the executive order called the Working Group on Financial Markets, which allows the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve to to manipulate every stock market and every commodity market in the world 24/7.
Also known as the plunge protection team.
That's correct. And that is in violation of our Constitution, and the effect of executive orders and signing exceptions both should be done away with, along with lobbying and campaign contributions. The government should finance elections, and everybody gets the same amount of money, and it can only, or should be able to only, campaign 2 months before an election.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. You know, our Congress people, our legislators have been so enticed by the money that it has been very easy for the bankers to seduce the politicians, and in a sense, the financial oligarchy that we've come to create in this country has so infected our government and administrative procedures that, quite frankly, the government works for the bankers, not the other way around. And it's kind of surprising when you think about it, but we're watching this accelerate at almost exponential numbers here over the last year or two, but it has certainly been going on for a long time. Bob, I'd like to have you take just a minute and help people understand the distinction between the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve, and help people to understand that the Federal Reserve is no more a federal agency than is Federal Express. It is a private corporation. It was formed in 1913, I believe, by the Federal Reserve Act to be the lender of last resort. But help people understand how to pick apart what is the Treasury, which is an arm of the federal government, and the Federal Reserve, and how they work together so that we can start to see the spider of control that grips us.
Well, there's two types of policy. The fiscal policy of the United States is run by the U.S. Treasury, and that includes tax collections and many other things, even the Secret Service. On the other side, you have the privately owned Fed, and they handle monetary policy. And it's the monetary policy is where the power lies, because perpetually and usually the fiscal policy is usually in deficit. This year it's going to be close to $2 trillion. Before that, I think the highest was about $486 billion. And that includes, of course, taking into consideration that a lot of the funds from Medicare and Social Security were included in that figure. So the figures are higher. Higher by how much? Probably $250 billion. And so you have to figure that into your thinking. But they have separate policy angles, but they work together. The reason they do is that the same group of people who go to the Treasury and fill other important posts throughout the administration and the cabinet, and the people who work in the 12 Federal Reserve banks, the most powerful being the Federal Reserve of New York, they are people by some of the same people from the same groups.
This is a revolving door between all of these agencies and all of these organizations, folks. The people are interchangeable. They trade around and go from one to the other depending on which administration or which mood is in vogue at the time.
That's precisely correct. And so we have this army of bureaucrats, all coming from the same groups, which I mentioned earlier, who run our country. And all of them, their mission is to have a world government and for the United States to give up its sovereignty, and at the same time create